Now, we're going to hear his story, so I'm not going to do a big long intro on him. But Matt, could you just start speaking, introduce yourself so that you're the main picture on here? And
Yeah, hopefully this kicks in then.
that's it.
Let me know if it does. It doesn't on mine. Yeah, so I'm Matt Cornford, founder of Queerlit and Social Refuge. Do you want me to give you the original background then, do you?
You give us a background for. Actually, no, let's start at the beginning instead of starting with Queerlit. So let's start with you rather than your organization, because this organization, Pride in Leadership, is focusing on the leaders, not
Hmm.
necessarily the organizations, although obviously we're going to talk about Queerlit.
Yeah.
So tell me about you. Where are you from? How did you end up
Oh,
in
I'm a
Manchester?
little country bumpkin down from Torbay in Devon, so about as far away as you can get. Um, and I ended up leaving there because there was a lack of queer community. I remember used to open Grinder, and like within the first five panels, it would be like 25 kilometers away was person number six. And just trying to find yourself and find acceptance down there was hard. And it wasn't because I wasn't surrounded by incredible people. It was just there was a lack of queer community down there. And people like me were disappearing to bigger cities. So I moved to Bristol and then found myself in London and then Edinburgh and then back in Manchester or now to Manchester. But I when we talk about pride and leadership, one of my roles before starting Queerlit was working with Three, the phone company, and they got me into their HR management capabilities. And my role was to inspire leaders to better manage people and inspire their people within stores. And that was fantastic. I really enjoyed that and ended up um, leaving them and going and joining a HR consultancy as a recruiter and HR consultant. And although the people were incredible, oh, I hated it. Um, and I think just the reactiveness of what and how they had to work was just it just wasn't me, and I ended up taking a year off after having a conversation with my dad before he passed away, and I remember him saying, you know, if you don't like it, get off, and I thought, right, okay, let's do this. And I spent a whole year doing absolutely nothing. It was wonderful. I just snowboarded all over the world. Everywhere I could find snow, I would fly to and just snowboarded. Um, then I got back and I was like, right, I actually have to do something with my life now, don't I? And at that point, I was an avid reader, loved reading, but I just couldn't find LGBTQ plus books on the high street. And I remember going into Waterstones in Manchester, and if anybody is around Manchester and knows the one on Deansgate, it's the size of a city block and it's 3 stories high. It's gigantic. And, you know, I like to think of myself as an extrovert, but there's moments of introvert, definitely. And this was one of them, having to go into the shop, trying to find somebody and ask them, you know, can you point me into the direction of your LGBTQ plus literature, please? And I remember this really friendly guy saying, we don't have a case for that anymore. We used to put tables together at different points of the year, so Pride Month and things like that. But unfortunately, we do have LGBTQ plus literature, but it's just spread all around the shop. So it meant if I wanted to go and find a romance, a queer romance, I had to go to the romance section and try and hunt through thousands of books for you know to see something that might have me in it. Or if I wanted a thriller or a crime or you know a fantasy book, I'd have had to have you know looked through 30,000 books just to try and find something that I may have wanted to read. And I thought, well, this is crap. Let's go and fix that. And kind of the idea of Queerlet started there, and that was just before COVID. So I had this idea that right, you know, let's start this concept. How could we bring it to a high street? And then COVID hit, and I thought, all right, that's 3 months of planning all down the drain and looking for finance and all this kind of stuff. And we have to reevaluate this. So I literally spent COVID on a computer, setting up a website, and just putting, well, 700 books at that point, all onto a Shopify account, and started selling from there.
Well, I think that's a brilliant summary of the whole story, really.
Yeah.
Um, so here's a question that I've not prepped you for. That I often sort of wonder with entrepreneurs. Like, you've had an idea there, you've stood in Waterstones thinking, God, this is awful for gay people. And you've thought, I could do something about it. But
Mm.
where do you get the idea from to then create such a massive bookstore? And how do you know it's going to be successful? And how do you actually get that oomph and that energy to start it in the first place?
I think in some ways, understanding readers as a reader, I know what I want to read. I know I want to see myself in literature. I know that it doesn't have to be a big part of the story. I just want to be able to see myself within moments. Um, so I started looking online to see if anyone else was doing it. And you have these huge, incredible places like Gaze the Word down in London, which is the icon of queer bookshops because they've been there since the 70s. But they weren't online at the time. And there was just one other little bookshop, the LGBTQ plus bookshop, that actually sold online. And I just thought, how hard must it be for everyone else who's trying to find this? Um, and when you ask, like how do these, as an entrepreneur, how do you know? Part of it is like is a punt. You've got to go right, okay. I mean, and this is why COVID actually worked really well for me. That sounds really bad to say, but it did in some ways because we got the opportunity to have minimum expenses because we were just an online shop, and we had the opportunity to ask people, how do you want us to behave? What is it that you would like from us? How do we need to interact with you to get best engagement? And actually, like as we started those conversations, people were just really honest about what it was they wanted from a bookshop or a community-led bookshop.
And what did they say that was different from what you would expect them to say to Waterstones?
Well, it was community led, so it was somewhere that people could, pick up a phone to us still, contact us and talk about their needs. And trust me, I'm sure we'll get into some of those weird and wonderful questions later when we dive into some more. But and then one of the other things was how we give back to community. It's very easy just to do something that, here's some money to a charity, and no doubt they're doing wonderful causes, but does it align with the customers that we're having, and does it align with us as a brand? So we've focused specifically on how did we give back to the community that aligned with us as a brand.
Mm. Mm. Could you tell us about the next step then, the most recent step that you've made into Social Refuge? What is Social Refuge? Maybe you could give us a wee look around.
Oh, you mean apart from a headache? Um, so we were down on Tib Street. We opened our Tib Street shop, which was 500 square feet. Um, and we opened that one with 1,700 different titles.
This is Queer Lit. This is the original, very, very small
Yeah,
shop
yeah,
on,
but
on
this
Tib
leads
Street.
this leads into what and why Social Refuge was created. And we had a 2-year lease down there, and this was another kind of taking a punt piece, which was we knew the online shop was performing really well, but we wanted a physical presence, and the high street started to open again after COVID. So we opened with 1,700 titles. And within 2 years, we had 4,500 different titles. So we just grew so quickly. We physically couldn't put everything on the shelf. And then I live in Ancoats in the city centre of Manchester. And 2 doors away from where I live, there's this huge PR firm that during COVID exited the building and left a 7,000 square foot venue open. And I walk past it every single day. And I thought, oh, how well, wouldn't that be amazing? But it was ridiculously expensive. Um, it would have been, well, it cost us £120,000 to build. So I knew all of these numbers were kind of up in the air for could we take on such a big place. Um, and this is where we took another punt. But I ended up coming in and chatting to the landlord, and I threw him a really stupid number, and he told me to sod off. But let's have a serious conversation. And we did, and we ended up with Social Refuge. But when we came up with the concept of how do we create a community-led bookshop with an event space so that we can do bookish style events, but with a coffee shop and a bar in it. So everything could become, a singular hub for anything that our community wanted to do. But we wanted it to be space driven and coffee driven rather than booze. So we do have a bar, but the bar kind of more facilitates things like we have book clubs, we have live bands, we have book launches. Yesterday, we had the Manchester Muslim group come in and use our space. All these different things about how can community use it, and happen to be, if they want a drink in the evening with it, then fine. But it was to kind of drive the opportunity to come and use somewhere that wasn't focused on booze.
Yeah, it's amazing. It is amazing. Have you got any pictures or links you'd like to share, Matt, or would you like to give us a little look
I mean,
round with
so
your camera?
yeah, well, so I'm in the basement area right now, which is part of the event space. I'll do a little twist for you in a minute. This part of the building is a bit weird and wonderful, as you can probably see with some of the art and graphics behind me, which is part of the basement. Um, so this is actually our biggest selling book from last year, A Trans Man Walks into a Gay Bar. But downstairs is just so that leads up to our big cohab area. So we have a cohab space that sits 24 people, and they can just come and work from home in our space and kind of create like a queer community office. Big projector screen. So this all actually gets emptied out and then refitted for any events that we have. So this is a bit weird. I wonder if I can walk you upstairs whilst we chat. This should work.
That would
We
be
will
lovely.
we will have a little wander as we do this. Um, but yeah, for anybody that hasn't been in our space before, she is gigantic. It's a bit of a beast. And there will be some people around right now.
And what I've noticed when I've been there, Matthew, is that you've got
So
some staff that are really committed as well.
yeah, so my assistant manager is actually behind me, probably waving over my shoulder. So this is the bookshop. So yeah, she's getting bigger. And then the other space behind us.
Yeah, bar area, coffee shop, all of
Yeah,
that. It's amazing as a queer venue, but it's an obviously queer venue that lots of other groups want to come to. It's a space that, I've brought the Chamber of Commerce to, for example. Manchester Uni has been speaking to me about whether, it would be a good space for them to bring conferences and things like that as well. So just having that facility in Manchester is really exceptional, I think. Tell us, Matthew, your story about one particular book that you provide to schools.
oh crikey. I wouldn't say there was one particular book for schools. So a moment ago I spoke about how we reacted to what our community said they wanted from us. And one of them was designating books to schools. Now, that was something that kind of sat really well for me. I don't know how many other people in the group that we're chatting to now, but I'm a Section 28 baby, which meant all through school, I never ever picked up a book at school, even as an avid reader. I never once saw myself in books at school. So I knew that I wasn't out at school. I definitely struggled with my sexuality and identity at that point. So I just thought, let's flood books into schools. And I think to date, we've sent over 3,000 books into schools for free. Um, what we tend to do, though, is we talk to schools. We ask them, do you want free books? This is what the content of them is. We chat with librarians at school. Quite often they'll say yes, some will say no. And if they say no, fantastic, because it means we don't waste £100 sending books into them. But we will have a conversation and ask what it is they're looking for. So sometimes we'll do a collection of graphic novels. Sometimes it's just some YA fun stuff. Sometimes it's a little bit more educational. We did a whole trans section as well. I think we sent like 350 trans copies of different books into range of schools as well. Yeah, so it's really an eclectic taste rather than just a singular book. Although we did send Simon James Green not not gay bar. Oh my God, I've forgotten the name of it off the top of my head now. Put under pressure. But there's a gay club, that was it, and it's about an LGBT group at school, and it's the race to become the president of the LGBT group, and it's just really fun. It's really inclusive. It's got everybody in it, and we sent, I think, about 500 copies of that out to schools.
Isn't the one book that you told me about once that is the most stolen book in school libraries?
Yeah. So Juno Dawson, This Book is Gay, is reported not just from school libraries, but also ordinary libraries. Is the most stolen book in the one of the most stolen books in the UK. And we went through a stage where if a librarian had reported to us that this book had gone from their library, we would replace it for them for free. But it just showed a need for kids going into the school and then slipping it in their bag because maybe they were too scared to log it out properly and bring it back. And I've been in that position where I probably wouldn't have gone up to the librarian and gone, haha, can I log out this book is gay, please? I would have been the one that needed to have snuck it home to want to discover about it. So yeah, the more it might sound strange when I go, the more kids that need to steal it, fine. We'll continue to replace them, but that kind of is the case.
And how are you affording to do that work? Because that's work that should be funded really at government level, I
Yeah.
would say.
So well, it kind of is. It's funded with two ways. One part of it is 50% with us. So if you go to our online shop, when you get to the checkout, it says to you, do you want to donate a percentage, so 5, 10, or 15% of your order to free books for schools? And then anybody who does, we end up matching it. So at the end of a quarter, there might be a couple of £1,000, and then we'll match it and then send it in. So it's half driven by engagement by people who are shopping with us. And then the other side of that is, the more that they engage, the more that we'll put in as well.
Mm. I'm going to ask the group here whether anybody's got any questions yet. If anybody does, if you just put yourself off mute and feel free to ask, or if not, feel free to type it into the chat. But I won't put pressure on you. Matt, what do you see do you see yourself as a leader now in the LGBT community?
It's really weird because do I see myself as it? No, in the sense that I'm just trying to run a cool little space, have some fun, um, continue to build something and engage with community. Whether I class that as leader, no. But everybody else seems to think so because I get everywhere I go, people pull me to one side. If I'm going to bars in the village or I go to an event, someone will start talking to me about how they've used the space, even the old shop, or what it meant to them being able to come in and openly ask questions, how they've worked with schools now to change, or they're working in a school and we've inspired them to do this or this within that school or that environment. But I think sometimes, I don't know how to word this, but sometimes I think just great leadership is giving someone the opportunity to grab the flag you've been waving and run along with it and do their own thing.
Mm, I like that. Obviously, the work that you're doing in schools is, well, at the moment, unfortunately, I would say it's contentious because of the way that the culture wars are being
Mm.
portrayed at the moment. Are you getting some grief on social media and things like that about supplying books into schools?
No, not once.
Really?
Um, I mean, every now and again you might get a singular comment, but there's never been like a backlash. There's I've never had anybody like really kick up or no, we've been really, really, really yeah, well supported in that sense. But I remember doing the LGBT Foundation do training, and one of the things that they talk about with online and online bullying and engagement online is never engage. So the
Mm,
moment that someone starts these kind of backlashes, don't comment on it, don't engage in conversation, don't. So we've always run that rule, which is if there was a comment, just ignore it, move on. So yeah, sorry, I'm noticing my screen's like popping up with questions.
Well, we've got the
Um,
first one. We've got the first one from Rosie. She's a consultant clinical psychologist lead in student mental health at Manchester. Just wondering how and whether we recommended your space as a safe place for our students. Rosie, would you like to come on and just have a just ask the question again?
Hello. Hi. Can you see
a
me?
Yes, we've
yeah,
Hi
got
there.
you.
Yeah, so as I say, I'm consultant clinical psychologist lead in student mental health, and I would say a fair majority of our referred students are either out or struggling with sexuality and or neurodivergent. Um, and so yeah, and you know, obviously coming to a new city, not always sure where to go that's safe to kind of meet other people. Obviously, recently there's been, you know, a lot of problems, and you know, we've had various referred people that have been assaulted on Canal Street, and you know, just generally. I think, like I said, the question is just generally around how can we promote your space, and is it okay to do that?
absolutely promote it. Um, where you spoke about neurodiverse people, they're very welcome here. What's really interesting is there's 7 of us work here and we're all neurodiverse. There's not a single neurotypical person that works here. So all of us have got something fun and funky going on, as we like to say. Um, our space is quite interesting because it's kitted out and created in, as you probably saw as I walked you around, vibrant areas, more quieter areas. So like that, there's music on all day and things like this. But then you've got the cohab space upstairs where if they're looking for somewhere really quiet, it's a white plain space. It's not visually too stimulating. There's no music up there, and it's a quieter zone where people can go. So there literally is moments within the space and the property that anybody can hide away. But generally, yeah, we're viciously queer in the sense that we're not one of these cafes or spaces that are like, oh, we're queer owned, but like, anyone can come. Anyone can come, but we scream the fact that we're a queer venue, and that's what our community needed.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Anytime. And we've got a lift as well, so the whole space is disability accessible.
I'm probably going to call in and visit you myself.
And say hi.
Yeah.
I'd recommend it very much. And when you say you're viciously queer, Matthew, that's obviously a decision that you've made. Would you say that was a business decision or a personal decision? How would you say those two things aligned?
It's both, and I've got to be really diplomatic how I word some parts next. So one of the things we wanted, or I wanted to do, was create something that Canal Street and the Village wasn't doing. Now, don't get me wrong, I love getting absolutely pissed and watching a drag queen. It's fantastic. It's community, that's what our community loves. But that's all that Canal Street really does. So when we opened here, we wanted how do we create other things that the village just won't touch? And I'm going to look at my phone for a second now. But if you go onto our Instagram page, for example, and then look up all the different things that are going on. So we host Narcotics Anonymous, we host yoga, we've got a knitting group, we've got a board game group,
Is your Instagram
sketching,
queer lit or is it
Queerlit UK, and there's Social Refuge MCR. But there's loads of weird and wonderful things on, and there's so many different events that are going on here and support groups that are going on here. You would not see them in the village. But we needed to, like a moment ago when she was at, or they were asking, is your place a safe space? We wanted to be able to go, we're absolutely queer. We're not just queer ran, but we're a queer space. And on top of that, you can come here and do all these weird and wonderful things that nowhere else in Manchester was kind of supporting. But when you were asking, was it a decision? This is what I've got really diplomatically. There were other queer coffee shops and queer owned businesses that we love them. Don't get me wrong. They inspired us. But some of them are like, shh, we're queer owned, rather than just being really proudly defiant that we're queer owned, we're a queer space. If you want to come in and use us, absolutely, that's fine. You know, if you're non-LGBTQ plus, and lots of people do, just be prepared that this is for our community, and that's what you're going to see when you come into this place.
I think that's wonderful, and I think it helps to break down some of the barriers that exist between different communities. You mentioned a Muslim group that's coming to use the space, Matthew. That's a great thing, isn't it, for Manchester and for, you know, the wider community. I always say that Manchester has the rainbow flag running through its DNA, and I think something like what you're doing, Social Refuge there, helps and really makes a difference. We've got a question from Daniel. Of all of your books, do you have one that you would recommend that we have to read? So he's an L&D, learning and development consultant and a coach. So maybe that you've got a book a bit about that, but maybe you could also recommend a novel.
I'm gonna go a little bit of a different route. So just because you've said you're a coach and a learning and development consultant, if you have, or maybe you have already, looked at The Velvet Rage. The Velvet Rage is a really interesting book. It's by a practitioner in the US who deals with mainly white middle-class men, but he looks at the internalized homophobia that people within our community have, because we're told, you know, you're faggots, you're worthless, and nobody wants you, and you're going to die of AIDS. All these things that our community was so aggressively told. And what's a really beautiful story, he's had to do an update to the book, because the first book talks about that internalized homophobia and how we struggle with ourselves and our own community and finding our own self-worth. And he's now done the update because he started working with younger people, and those screams and shouts of "you're worthless and nobody wants you" are now small echoes of what they used to be. And he's now working with younger people who are well-rounded young queer people that didn't have some of this velvet rage and the struggles. And I think when you think about our community in that way, where, like I said at the very beginning of the call, I'm a little country bumpkin in the arse end of nowhere that never had community, didn't see self-worth, didn't find myself. Suddenly, when you can create spaces, or you read those kind of books and you start to identify the importance of these spaces and community-led work, that book kind of really kind of highlighted for me the importance of why we all need to work harder for our community.
I think we'll all go and buy
Hope that made sense.
I think we'll all go and buy that, Matthew. That would be lovely. Where do you think we've got to go now as a community? What as leaders across in different ways, across different sectors and all LGBT, what can we do as this group? And what do you think we need to be doing, you know, at government level, say, or at local government level?
I think it would be silly to not talk about the current fight. I mean, the queer fight continues, right? The subject just changes constantly. So if we go back to the 70s, it was gays and lesbians, and persons of color. And then we moved now, and you know, we hope that acceptance has started to kind of form into a better place. And now a fight against the most minority part of our community has kind of risen to a disgusting amount, to the point that, you know, there's a reemergence of Section 28 coming out again, isn't there? I think that's got to be our biggest focus now, is the trans community, our trans family. It's not community, it's family. They're going through the same fight that we did as queer people, is in gays and lesbians did 30, 40 years ago. It's the same. I mean, they're people are literally using the same artwork and just changing the text in it. So we know it's just a horrific reemergence of what's happened once. But I don't think we're reacting as well as we could do. What's really interesting is when we talk about HIV, not many people talk about what lesbians did for gay men when, like, gay guys were really, really struggling and they were on their deathbeds and our community was being attacked, and the government was sticking up videos and advertise, or, you know, TV advertisements of a grave being, you know, all these horrific things. And now we're looking at it going, how do the rest of the LGBTQ community stand up for our trans community like they did back then. And I don't think some of that works being as supported as it needs to be. Now we're in Manchester. Bev is fantastic. You had her on recently at one of the in-person events.
Yeah, just
and
for
she was
everybody
talking-
who's not a Manchester person, Bev Craig is the leader of Manchester City Council and is a lesbian and spoke at one of our events in summer last year. Sorry, carry on.
No, that's perfect. And I think from Manchester, Manchester is really, or one of the best cities that I've been in, really trans-led. And we've got Trans Pride Manchester, we've got Trans Vegas, and all these different organisations here that and Sparkle as well, that's become even kind of better. I say better because it's transformed over the 15 years that it's been going to really support trans people. But it isn't everywhere. My one of my friends' son has just started transitioning, really struggling at school, but they're also in the arse end of nowhere where there isn't enough community to find friends and to find support. And that's probably where that velvet rage comes back in again, which is internalized, maybe not homophobia, but you know what I mean? Internalized poor self-worth, because, all of these horrific screams are back again for that part of the community.
Yeah, I would like to open this conversation out to anybody else who's got an opinion that you would like to share. If anybody on here would like to say anything at this point, then please do feel free. Daniel, thank you for posting the link to that book for us. That's saved us all trawling around Google for that. Thank you. Sam Palmer is asking how they can book the space, and also asking whether you operate as a private limited business or a third sector organisation, Matthew.
So we've got an events manager called Joshua. So his email address is joshua@socialrefuge.com. Fire him an email. We sit down and we go through all the events requests together, and he'll come back to you. We're a limited business, so this is all me. It's all huge amounts of debts and loans that are enabling us to do this rather than going out and finding grants. But what that enabled me to, sorry, 1 second. No, leave it off, please, for me. Upstairs, you can put it on, but not down here. Sorry, I turned all the music off down here, and my assistant manager's like, "Why is there no music on?" Yeah, so no, one of the things I've had some people ask about, did we want to set up as either a charitable organization or as a community led, and if I'm really honest, I didn't want anybody else to get their hands on it. I knew that we wanted to behave in a really specific way, and I didn't want to jeopardize that by letting other people come in and have a say on that. That might sound really bad, but we're always going to be community led, so that's not going to change from us. Being a charity piece, it just didn't, the maths didn't add up right on all the requirements for the work that we were doing. It's easier just to say, as a business, we're donating it out.
I think that makes sense. I think the nature of business at the moment is changing and becoming much more community oriented, environmentally conscious, all of those kinds of things. The way that business leaders are portrayed in the press is always this fat cat businessman kind of trope, I guess. And increasingly, I think you see business leaders that have a real strong sense of purpose, a real strong sense of community. They want to create quality jobs and quality environments. And I think you're an example of that. And I think that those lines are blurring somewhat. I welcome your perspective, Sam, if you would like to speak.
Yeah, definitely, please. Yeah. Just to say, like, there are other models besides the charity model, which are kind of like social enterprises or CIOs or whatever, where you're not. I totally understand what you're saying about being governed by a board who might have different ideas and take it off in a direction that you didn't want to do. My only kind of thought behind my question was, there's just so much opportunity and scope that you could do, and which you can do as a business, but I feel as like a third sector organization, there's a lot you could do extra and bring in extra funding for.
My worry is, trust me when I say this place can break me. Up until recently, I was doing 73-hour weeks, and I've got it down to 62, I think it is at the moment. And last week was 54, so that was incredible.
Wow.
Um, I've helped is it CIPs, and we helped one in Liverpool that was doing some work. And the problem is when anything goes wrong or people can't finish their jobs or they walk away, you end up being left in this horrific limbo place because people have started a journey and then have needed to walk away, or it's too stressful, or there's, and trust me when I say it, this is stressful. It's a business that turns over more than £1 million, has 7 members of staff, is continually evolving, and as the business owner, I've needed to push myself to the point of needing to break in order to get everything delivered. I couldn't ask that of another group of people. And if they had then started to have gone, this is too much, or walk away, or we've had drag story time, and if there were bad press or if there was a backlash, they couldn't want to deal with it or didn't want to be engaged with it. And I've just seen so many where it's just gone wrong. And I thought, I just don't want to set that part up for a fail. I don't know. I mean, I'm always happy for people to come in and work with us. It's just, I don't know, relinquishing some of that power over. And then if it all goes wrong, you've just got so many pieces to pick up.
Yeah, true. The other thing, sorry, one of the questions is the opportunity for like people to volunteer to support you, because I can imagine there would be a lot of offers. Would you be open to that? It doesn't look like you would.
I absolutely believe that you should be paid for your hard work. And we even have kids come in and do their school week with us, and things. Then we will pay you. It's wonder we get loads. I mean, I can't say I haven't had people come in and charity, because when we were setting this place up, I was like, please, people, come and grab a paintbrush, help us paint. Like, we're desperate for to kind of get back onto our time scale. But as opposed to other parts, I genuinely just believe everybody needs to be paid for their time. So if people do come and work with us, we will pay you.
Right. Sorry, one last thing. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Funny story. In my last charity, we actually came to look at that space because they were looking at taking it over. And I'm so glad that they didn't, because I've been in there and I think it's a fantastic space and I think you're doing a great job. So
well, thank you very much. Thank you.
Matthew, at the beginning of this, I asked you about your background and where you were from, and you talked about coming from the arse of nowhere. And I just wondered, like, do you still speak to people from the arse of nowhere? And what do they think of what you're doing?
Yeah, I do. One of my best mates, who I literally grew up 2 doors. Well, I've got some funny stories here, but I grew up 2 doors away. He drove up to come and say hi and see the place. So no, I do. I still have a lot of friends down there. I just don't have loads of gay friends down there. But again, I even think that's changing now, because I remember I took some graphic novels down when I went down for Christmas 2 years ago, and I took it down for his 2 kids. And one of them, I think she must have been 12 at the time. And I said, oh, and this one's Witch Boy. This is about a young trans guy. And just from the side of like my side eye, I just saw my best mate, who I'm just about to turn 40. I know, it's horrific. I just saw him shake his head at me. And I looked over and I said, oh, is it not okay to? And he went, oh, mate, you don't need to. She's got a trans mate in class, so she'll tell you more than you know. And I just thought, like, oh, crap, okay. Like, I was about to full on mansplain, like, what trans was to this kid. And they already know, because one of their friends is in school. And obviously they just don't care. It's just fine. So I think some of that is changing. It just wasn't there when I was there.
Yeah, yeah. And are they proud of what you've done? Do they get it? Would you say that it breaks down? It's breaking down in those kinds of places as well as in places like Manchester.
I don't know, because I get like all flustered when any of them talk about like trying to be proud. I had some friends that have been over in New Zealand, 2 doctors that have been working, and they came in yesterday to see the space, and they just couldn't stop kind of like praising it. And yeah, I'm just one of those people who run away when people do that. So but I know my mum's happy, so that's going to be something. She's my biggest advocate.
Very good. That's what we all need, isn't it? So
It is.
what's next then, Matt? What's your plans?
Well, at the moment, we're just ramping everything up. So we talk about that we want to be a community-led space. When we first opened back in October, bear in mind that we were meant to be open 6 months before, but we just came up against obstacle after obstacle in preparing to open. So we were meant to be in here for the summer, but when we opened in October, we just got flooded with Christmas events, which was wonderful because it got lots of people in the venue and it got lots of people experiencing us as a brand, and kind of what we could offer. Now we're into January. We just want to start that community-led stuff. So all these weird and wonderful ideas that people want to throw at us, we want to start running them now. So if there's a group out there that wants to use our space, wants to do something where they can't find an opportunity to somewhere else, sorry for swearing, but I like to use the word, I'm just throw shit against a wall and see what sticks. And we're in a position where we can do that because the bookshop and the coffee shop's doing really, really well. So someone can come to us, let's throw it against a wall. If it sticks and it works, let's continue doing it. If it doesn't, let's readdress it again in 6 months and just see if it wasn't the right time or we weren't marketing correctly to get the right people on. But yeah, we're just going to do weird and wonderful things and see what the community react to.
At the beginning of this, I asked everybody to join our mailing list, the Pride in Leadership mailing list. Do you have a mailing list, Matthew, that you would like to promote to everyone on here?
By all means, if anybody goes to Queerlit, the first thing that pops up is an opportunity to join our mailing list. And I think you can win £50 that we give away in vouchers as well. So jump on there. We're normally pretty chatty, although we've been silent for the last month on some of our comms.
And as I asked you a question, I'm not sure we quite got round to answering it, so I'm going to ask you again. We've got this little group here. We've also got the wider Pride in Leadership sort of community, which is about 1,000 people across the country. What do you think we could do as leaders across different sectors, across the UK? What should we be doing in our businesses, in our communities, in our lives, I guess, that will help?
Be loud. I think that's the one thing we have to do. And our community is very, very good at it. I spoke before about I like to be an extrovert, and in my own space, I'm an extrovert. But when I'm out of my space, I'm an introvert. And I'm having to become that person who, when I'm out of my space, still be confident about talking about queerness. And I still get embarrassed sometimes when I'm having a chat with somebody and I don't know them and I go, "Oh, I own a gay bookshop," because I still worry about what's their reaction going to be. But I'm not. I'm confidently queer, so sod you. That should really be but I'm not. I still have to be concerned. And I live my life as queer as I possibly can because of this space, but I still worry. So, the opportunities that you can, be confident, be queer, and be loud about it. And, I know that's really easy to say because not everybody can be, because there can be backlash. But, the opportunities that you can be, just be confident around it.
That's fantastic.
I don't know whether that really answered it.
No, I think that's really important, actually. We've all got roles to play, and depending on where we sit in different sizes and shapes of business, by being out and being loud about it, we can make a huge difference. I guess that's what we're doing with Pride in Leadership itself, just creating a space to elevate LGBT leaders' voices, to make them more visible. If we can't see each other, first of all, if we're all sort of quiet, then we can't help each other. So that's the first thing. But also, we are not being role models for the people that are coming through, perhaps worrying that their lives might not be so good, that they might not have success because they're not able to look and see queer leaders being successful in their organizations, perhaps.
This is it. But sometimes there's organizations which behave differently than what you would expect. So there's a guy called Ben who works for Wix. And Ben reached out to us years ago and they spent a huge amount of money with us, sending books all around their entire network. And when we've sat and had a conversation about it, You wouldn't necessarily think a business like Wix has a Pride in Wix section, but they do, and they have hundreds of people in their organization that are part of this Pride group. And if somebody said to me, Wix, DIY company, are they going to be great on queer issues? I would have gone, well, probably not. No, it's not the kind of the forefront of where I'm thinking IT, I'm thinking healthcare, I'm thinking all these other variants. But yeah, they were the one that were taking huge backlash for doing a huge trans parade down in Brighton and up in Manchester. And so confidently as a business when, if you want a refund on your kitchen, just message us, because evidently we don't want you as customers if you don't believe in what we believe, and we believe in full inclusivity. And I think they just stood their ground. So when we talk about businesses and being confident and being loud and being proud about it, some businesses are doing it in such an incredible way. But some of them are the businesses you just wouldn't expect to be doing it as well.
I think that's a really great example of the kind of organisation you wouldn't expect to be making a huge difference. But I know, for example, there's another charity in Manchester called the Proud Trust, a youth charity, and Wix supports them a lot. And they've actually done the renovation for them in their space, which is a space focused on LGBT youth. And so that's pretty great, isn't it? To use your actual business structure and expertise to support something like that. If there's no more questions, I think we'll wrap up. So please wave quickly if you want to ask a question. But otherwise, Matthew, I know that you said you feel very socially awkward with people telling you that they're proud of you, but I would like you to know that certainly I feel extremely proud of what you've done in Manchester. I think that you've made a massive difference to the city already, and you only launched in October. And I'm getting clapped for this, so I must be right. But thank you for what you've done, and thank you for bringing that ambition as well to the city. You're getting some comments saying it's an awesome space, that people are looking forward to coming. Yeah, that's it. Loved the session, loved hearing all about you. Please, everybody, spend some money at Queer Lit, spend some money at Social Refuge. We need to keep the pink pounds circulating, and keep it going and make sure that it's successful. Thank you all so much for attending.